After 15 years of saving every extra penny and working countless overtime shifts, I had finally achieved my dream. My very own house with a custom in-ground pool in the prestigious Oakwood Estates. I can still remember the first time I dipped my toes into the crystal-clear water, watching sunlight dance across the surface. The pool was not just a luxury. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for, a testament to my perseverance and dedication. Oakwood Estates appeared perfect in every way possible. The lawns were immaculately maintained, the houses painted in tasteful colors, and the streets clean enough to eat from. My neighbors welcomed me with homemade pies and invitations to backyard barbecues. I felt like I had finally found my place in the world, a community where I truly belonged. The Homeowners Association seemed reasonable at first. Monthly meetings were casual affairs held in the community center, where we discussed simple matters like seasonal decorations and community gardening projects. The annual dues were modest, and the rules made sense. No excessive noise after 10 p.m., trash bins tucked away after collection, and basic standards for home maintenance. Everything designed to maintain our little slice of suburban paradise. I first met Corinne Miller at the summer kickoff barbecue. She approached me with a dazzling smile and a plate of homemade cookies. "Welcome to Oakwood Estates. I have been watching your pool installation. It turned out absolutely beautiful," she gushed, her eyes traveling past me to scan my backyard. "You must be so proud. Not many homes in our community have such a spectacular feature." Corinne seemed pleasant enough, always ready with a compliment or a neighborhood update. She knew everyone and everything, which children were struggling in school, whose marriage was on the rocks, and who had recently been passed over for promotion. At the time, I mistook her intense interest for genuine community involvement rather than the information-gathering operation it truly was. The winds of change began blowing through Oakwood Estates when our HOA president, a retired schoolteacher named George, announced he was moving to Florida to be closer to his grandchildren. An emergency election was held, and Corinne ran unopposed. No one thought much of it. After all, she had always been involved in community affairs. Within weeks of Corinne taking office, subtle shifts began. HOA meetings were no longer friendly gatherings but formal affairs with strict attendance requirements. Minutes were meticulously recorded, with Corinne emphasizing the violations section, where she listed homeowners who had broken even the smallest rules. Fines increased for infractions as minor as leaving a garden hose uncoiled or having blinds of unapproved colors. As we all know, property values are directly tied to community standards. Corinne would say at each meeting, her voice carrying a hint of steel beneath its honey-sweet tone. "We must be vigilant in maintaining the Oakwood Estates aesthetic." I noticed how Corinne would walk through the neighborhood each evening, clipboard in hand, making notes about properties. When she passed my house, her gaze always lingered on my pool, something calculating in her expression that made me uncomfortable. During one particular meeting, when discussing community resources, I caught her staring at me with an unsettling intensity. "Some residents have amenities that could benefit the entire community," she said, her eyes fixed on me. "We should explore ways to share these valuable resources." The other homeowners nodded in agreement, not yet understanding what was really happening. But that night, standing on my back porch looking at my beloved pool glimmering under the moonlight, I felt the first hairline cracks appearing in my perfect suburban dream. Something was shifting in our community, and the epicenter of that change was Corinne Miller. The crisp white envelope bearing the Oakwood Estates HOA logo appeared in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning. I assumed it was the monthly newsletter, or perhaps a reminder about upcoming landscaping regulations. What I found inside left me staring in disbelief, reading and rereading the words as if they might change upon closer inspection. The letter, printed on official HOA stationery, outlined plans for the annual Oakwood Estates Community Gala, an event I had never heard of before. What stunned me was not the event itself, but its proposed location, my backyard. The letter detailed how my generous pool area would be transformed with a temporary dance floor constructed directly over the water surface. Installation would begin in 2 weeks, with the event scheduled for the following Saturday. This was not phrased as a request. It was a notification, complete with a detailed schedule of when contractors would arrive and what accommodations I was expected to make. At the bottom was Karen's elaborate signature, followed by, "We appreciate your community spirit in this matter." I immediately called Karen, my hands shaking with confusion and indignation. After several rings, she answered with a cheerful, "Karen Miller speaking." "Karen, this is your neighbor from 347 Maple Drive. I just received a letter about using my backyard for some gala. There must be a mistake." "Oh no, no mistake at all." Her voice remained unnaturally bright. "Your property has the perfect layout for our annual event. That gorgeous pool area provides exactly the right atmosphere we are aiming for this year." I struggled to keep my tone level. "But Karen, no one discussed this with me. I never agreed to have dozens of strangers trampling through my property or building structures over my pool." "Well, we did mention utilizing community resources at the last meeting. You were present, as I recall." Her voice cooled several degrees. "Everyone is counting on you to be a team player here. The committee has already sent out invitations mentioning the beautiful water feature." My disbelief turned to anger. "You cannot just commandeer my private property for an event. My pool was not designed to support a dance floor. This could cause serious damage." Section 17.3 of the Covenant clearly states that during special community events, the association maintains rights of reasonable access to all properties within the development, Karen responded, her tone suddenly formal and clipped. "The board has unanimously approved this decision." "That clause is for emergency services access, not social events," I protested. "I am afraid that is your interpretation, not the board's," Karen replied dismissively. "Listen, several very important community figures will be attending. This is not just about a party. This is about maintaining Oakwood Estates' reputation as the premier neighborhood in the district." Before I could respond, she continued, "Noncompliance with board decisions carries significant financial penalties, $250 per day, plus potential property liens for continued violations. I would hate to see you become an example of what happens when residents refuse to support community initiatives." The threat hung in the air between us. "We will be in touch with installation details," Karen concluded. "I trust you will make the right decision for our community." With that, she ended the call, leaving me holding the phone in stunned silence. I stood in my kitchen, looking out at my cherished pool, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. The afternoon sun sparkled on its surface as it had hundreds of times before, but now that peaceful scene was threatened by Karen's unreasonable demands and thinly veiled threats. The deadline for compliance was just 2 days away, and the weight of her warning about financial penalties felt like a stone in the pit of my stomach. That night, I spread the HOA covenant documents across my dining table, a cold cup of coffee at my elbow and reading glasses perched on my nose. I had never before read every word of the 50-page document, but now I scoured each paragraph, highlighting relevant sections and making frantic notes in the margins. Section 17.3 did exist, but its original context was clearly meant for utility workers and emergency services, not social gatherings benefiting the HOA president's agenda. The next morning, bleary-eyed but determined, I called Robert Green, a neighbor who had once mentioned practicing real estate law. He agreed to meet me at the local coffee shop, away from prying eyes. Robert arrived looking nervous, constantly glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to report our meeting. "Based on what you have shown me, they are grossly overreaching," Robert confirmed, keeping his voice low. "The HOA does not have authority to essentially seize your property for an event." He sipped his Americano before continuing. "However, fighting this will be expensive. Karen has the HOA treasury at her disposal for legal fees, while you would be paying out of pocket." "What about talking to other neighbors? Surely they can see how wrong this is," I suggested. Robert grimaced. "Many have faced similar situations. The Johnsons were forced to remove their basketball hoop despite it being grandfathered in. The Patels had to repaint their front door from burgundy to maroon based on Karen's personal color preference. No one fought back because the fines would have been more expensive than compliance." Over the next few days, I discreetly approached several neighbors. Most expressed sympathy but quickly changed the subject. One elderly woman whispered, "We cannot afford to get on her bad side. Last year she targeted the Wilsons until they finally moved away." Fear had silenced an entire community. As a last resort, I requested an emergency HOA meeting to discuss the gala plans. To my surprise, Karen readily agreed. That evening, the community center filled with residents, and I arrived with my notes and highlighted covenant. When my turn to speak came, I calmly outlined my concerns about property rights and potential damage to my pool. Before I could finish, Karen interrupted. "What we are witnessing here is the unfortunate spectacle of a homeowner putting selfish interests above community welfare." Her voice carried perfectly through the room. While most residents happily contribute to neighborhood events, some seem to forget that community means sharing resources for common benefit. As neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, Karen continued her masterful manipulation. "This annual event brings prestige to Oakwood Estates, raising all property values. Is one person's temporary inconvenience worth damaging our neighborhood's reputation?" One by one, I watched my neighbors' expressions harden against me. Defeated, I left the meeting early. Walking home, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury car parked outside Karen's house. Through her picture window, I could see her enthusiastically showing something to 3 well-dressed visitors. The next day, my longtime neighbor Elaine provided the missing piece of the puzzle. "Those were investors from Downtown Design District," she whispered during a chance meeting at the mailboxes. "Karen has been trying to secure funding for her interior design business for years. This gala is her chance to impress them with her event planning skills and connections." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This had never been about community values or neighborhood prestige. Karen was using her position of power to further her personal business ambitions, and my cherished pool was just collateral damage in her scheme. As I watched Elaine hurry away, clearly afraid of being seen talking to me, I understood that traditional routes of opposition were closed. Karen had the entire neighborhood in her grip, and no one was willing to stand against her. 3 days later, another envelope arrived. This one marked "Final Notice" in aggressive red letters. The language inside had escalated dramatically. Failure to comply within 48 hours will result in fines of $500 per day and initiation of property lien procedures. The letter concluded with a reminder that all legal costs incurred by the HOA would be added to my financial obligations. I was still staring at this threatening document when the sound of vehicles pulling into my driveway snapped me back to reality. Through my front window, I watched two unmarked white vans park. Men in work clothes emerged carrying measuring tape, clipboards, and various tools. Karen stepped out from her SUV parked behind them, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, phone in hand. Without even knocking, she directed the workers toward my backyard gate. Something inside me snapped. I rushed outside, blocking their path before they could reach the gate. "What do you think you are doing?" I demanded, voice shaking with barely contained fury. Karen looked at me as if I were a mildly annoying insect. "The installation team needs to take preliminary measurements. Please step aside." "You cannot just show up unannounced and expect access to my property," I insisted, standing my ground. "I sent you multiple notices," Karen replied coolly. "Now please move aside or we will document your interference with official HOA business." By this point, neighbors had begun to appear on porches and peer through windows. Karen noticed our audience and seemed to relish the confrontation even more. "Who do you think you are?" she hissed, stepping closer, her perfectly manicured finger jabbing toward my chest. "Nobody says no to me in MY neighborhood. Do you understand how quickly I can make your life miserable here?" The mask of community leader had slipped completely, revealing the true Karen underneath. The contractors exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained silent, clearly unwilling to get involved. "You have until tomorrow to accept the inevitable," Karen announced loudly enough for the onlookers to hear. "After that, the penalties begin." With that, she turned on her heel, ordered the contractors back to their vehicles and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway, humiliated and furious. That afternoon, one of the contractors secretly returned to my house. "I wanted you to see these," he said nervously, sliding several diagrams from his folder. "The structure they want to build, those support beams will rest directly on your pool's skimmer system and main drain. With people dancing, the weight could crush those components beyond repair." I thanked him for the warning as my heart sank further. Not only was Karen forcing this ridiculous event on me, but her plan would likely cause thousands of dollars in damage to my pool, damage I doubted she had any intention of repairing. That night was the lowest point of my entire time in Oakwood Estates. I paced through my house, alternating between rage and despair. I had worked my entire adult life for this home, this pool, this piece of the American dream. Now a power-hungry tyrant was about to destroy it while my neighbors watched in silent complicity. Sleep proved impossible. Around 2 a.m., I wandered to the kitchen for a glass of water. Through the window, moonlight illuminated my pool, creating silver ripples across its surface. My gaze drifted to the small control panel on the wall, the system that regulated the pool's various functions: filtration, heating, lighting, and the wave machine feature that could generate gentle currents for resistance swimming. I approached the panel, running my fingers over the buttons. The wave function had multiple settings, from a gentle ripple to a fairly strong current. I had rarely used it, having no real need for resistance training. As I stood there in the dim light, finger hovering over the controls, an idea began to take shape in my mind. If Karen insisted on building a dance floor over my pool, there was nothing I could do to stop her without facing financial ruin. But perhaps there was another way to protect what was mine, a way that would expose Karen's overreach to the entire community in spectacular fashion. The thought of what might happen made my stomach twist with anxiety, but after months of bullying and threats, something inside me had finally hardened into resolve. I stared at the wave machine button, my finger trembling just above it. This was either the most foolish idea I had ever conceived or my only path to justice. Either way, once this plan was set in motion, there would be no going back. Morning brought clarity and purpose. I had spent the remainder of the night researching pool systems, taking photographs of my equipment and documenting the current state of my backyard. If I was going to proceed with my plan, I needed to be thorough and careful. Once everything was prepared, I picked up the phone and dialed Corinne's number. "I have been expecting your call," she answered smugly. "You win, Corinne," I said, keeping my voice flat and defeated. "Use the pool for your dance." The satisfied sound she made was almost a purr. "I am glad you have come to your senses. The contractors will arrive this afternoon to begin preparations." "I have two conditions," I said quickly. "First, I need to maintain access to my pool equipment room during the event for safety monitoring. Second, I want documentation of the pool's current condition before installation begins." Corinne paused, likely weighing whether these requests might interfere with her plans. "Fine," she finally agreed, "but no disruptions during the event, and you will be expected to attend as the property host." "Of course," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice remained despite my racing heart. Over the next several days, my backyard transformed into a construction zone. Workers arrived early each morning, building a complex structure of metal supports designed to distribute weight evenly across the pool's surface. I observed from behind my curtains, documenting every stage with my camera while making detailed notes about my pool system's baseline settings. The dance floor itself was more elaborate than I had imagined, interlocking hardwood panels creating a solid platform, suspended mere inches above my pool's water line. The workers followed Corinne's exacting specifications, completely indifferent to how their support beams pressed dangerously against my pool's crucial components. Corinne visited multiple times daily to inspect progress, each appearance marked by a triumphant glance toward my windows. On her third visit, she brought along the investors I had seen previously, gesturing grandly around my backyard as if it were her own creation. "The underwater lighting will create the perfect ambience," I overheard her saying. "Imagine dancing above the illuminated water. It will be the talk of the district." By Friday evening, the transformation was complete. My once peaceful oasis had become an elegant venue with string lights crisscrossing overhead, floral arrangements bordering the dance floor, and a small stage for a live band. Tables draped in expensive-looking linens surrounded the pool-turn dance floor, each set with crystal glassware that caught the light from strategically placed lanterns. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the elaborate flower arrangements. Caterers bustled about setting up serving stations, while a string quartet tested their instruments on the small stage. I dressed in the formal attire specified in Corinne's detailed instructions to homeowners, then positioned myself near the sliding glass door leading to my backyard. Guests began arriving at 7, greeted by Corinne in a shimmering silver dress that caught the light with every movement. She stood at the entrance to my backyard like a queen holding court, accepting compliments on her vision and exceptional planning skills. The investors were among the first arrivals, dressed impeccably and carrying expensive-looking gift bags. When I finally stepped outside, Corinne's smile tightened. "Ah, this is the homeowner," she said dismissively to the group around her. "So kind of him to host us." She then leaned closer to her companions and whispered something that made them laugh while looking back at me. My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I forced a polite smile. As the evening progressed, the crowd grew until nearly 60 people stood, sat, and mingled throughout my backyard. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres while the quartet played softly in the background. From the corner of my eye, I monitored the dance floor, noting how it shifted slightly under the weight of guests who had begun to dance. Karen remained in constant motion, guiding her investors around the party, introducing them to select guests, and repeatedly drawing attention to various design elements she had personally selected. Not once did she acknowledge that this was my property or thank me for the use of my backyard. When the party reached full swing and attention had drifted away from me, I slipped quietly toward the pool equipment room located at the side of the house. Heart pounding in my chest, hands slightly trembling, I entered the small enclosure and closed the door behind me. The control panel glowed with its familiar blue light, all systems currently running at normal settings. I reached into my pocket and removed the remote control unit I had programmed earlier that week, a precaution in case Karen stationed someone near the equipment room. With this device, I could activate the wave machine from anywhere in the yard, maintaining plausible deniability. Taking a deep breath, I slipped the remote back into my pocket and rejoined the party, the weight of what I was about to do heavy on my shoulders. From my kitchen window, I had a perfect view of the gala in full swing. The string quartet had been replaced by a DJ, and the dance floor now held at least 30 people moving to an upbeat melody. Karen stood in the center of it all, her silver dress catching the light from the pool illumination below. The investors remained close by her side, clearly impressed by the spectacle she had created. At precisely 9:30, Karen tapped a champagne glass with a silver spoon, signaling for the music to quiet. The crowd turned toward her expectantly as she raised her glass in a toast. "I want to thank everyone for coming to our annual Oakwood Estates Community Gala," she began, her voice carrying across my backyard. "As your HOA president, community leadership has always been my highest priority." From my position just inside the sliding glass door, I could see the self-satisfaction radiating from her as she continued. "This event exemplifies what can be accomplished when residents work together toward a common vision." Her eyes flicked briefly toward me, a flash of smugness crossing her features before she returned her attention to her adoring audience. "I am especially grateful to our special guests this evening," Karen continued, nodding toward the investors. "Your presence honors our community, and I hope tonight demonstrates the kind of excellence and innovation I bring to everything I touch." The dance floor had reached maximum capacity, with nearly 40 people now crowded onto the structure above my pool. The weight caused subtle movements in the water below, visible through small gaps between the panels. It was now or never. With trembling fingers, I reached into my pocket and pressed the first button on the remote control. The lowest setting, barely a ripple. I held my breath, watching for any reaction. For several moments, nothing seemed to happen. The party continued, glasses clinked, and Karen basked in her moment of glory. Then, almost imperceptibly, a few dancers looked down at their feet with puzzled expressions. One woman steadied herself against her partner. The vibration was so subtle that most attributed it to their own movement or perhaps too much champagne. I pressed the second level. The wave machine increased its output slightly, creating gentle but consistent motion beneath the dance floor. On the far edge of the platform, champagne in crystal glasses began to show tiny ripples, reminiscent of the famous scene from Jurassic Park. A few guests exchanged confused glances, looking down at the floor and then around at others. Karen, still midway through her self-congratulatory speech, had not yet noticed the growing disturbance. The investors, however, had stopped nodding along and were now looking questioningly at the floor beneath their feet. Level 3. The wave action intensified, creating a rhythmic undulation that could no longer be ignored. The first audible crack came from the southwestern corner of the dance floor, a sharp sound that cut through the music and conversation. Heads turned as a small gap appeared between two panels, water visibly moving beneath. "What was that?" someone asked loudly as Corinne's speech faltered. Level 4. The waves grew stronger, pushing against the underside of the platform with increasing force. Multiple sections began to shift and separate. Water sprayed up through the widening gaps, splashing the shoes and pant legs of startled guests. Confusion turned to alarm as people began moving toward the edges of the dance floor. Corinne finally noticed what was happening, her face transitioning from annoyance at the interrupted speech to dawning horror. "What is going on?" she demanded, looking wildly around at the contractors who had built the structure. Before anyone could respond, I activated Level 5, the highest setting. The effect was immediate and dramatic. A powerful wave surged beneath the dance floor, lifting one entire section nearly 6 inches before dropping it back down. The sudden movement created a domino effect across the structure. Panels buckled and separated, sending guests stumbling and sliding as water gushed through the growing openings. Chaos erupted. Women in expensive dresses scrambled to escape the dance floor, designer shoes abandoned in their haste. Men in tailored suits found themselves waist-deep in pool water as sections collapsed beneath them. Purses, phones, and champagne glasses became casualties to the chlorinated water that now flowed freely across what remained of Corinne's perfect dance floor. At the center of it all stood Corinne, her silver dress now soaked and clinging to her legs, makeup streaking down her face. Her carefully styled hair hung in wet strands around her shoulders. In her hand, her expensive smartphone dripped water onto the buckling wood beneath her feet. Her eyes found me through the sliding glass door. "You did this," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. "You ruined everything." The investors she had been so eager to impress were already retreating, brushing water from their clothes and muttering to each other in obvious displeasure. Other guests hurried toward the exits, some laughing nervously, others openly angry about their ruined attire. I stepped outside, maintaining a composed expression. "It appears there was a malfunction with the pool system," I said calmly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Perhaps installing a heavy structure over active water features without proper engineering oversight was not the best idea." Corinne's face contorted with rage as she waded through knee-deep water toward me. "You turned it on. You did this deliberately." Her voice had reached a pitch I had never heard from her before. All pretense of the composed community leader completely evaporated. "That is a serious accusation," I replied steadily. "The equipment room has been accessible all evening as we agreed. Anyone could have bumped the controls." Around us, the party had devolved into complete disarray. Soaking wet guests gathered on the lawn, wringing out clothing and assessing damaged possessions. The beautiful dance floor now resembled a shipwreck, broken panels floating on the pool's surface, while others hung precariously from the metal framework. Corinne stood in stunned disbelief, watching her carefully orchestrated evening, and likely her business opportunity, dissolve quite literally before her eyes. When she turned back to me, her expression had hardened into something dangerous. "You will pay for this," she hissed, pulling out her waterlogged phone. "I am calling the police right now. Destruction of property, reckless endangerment. I will see you arrested tonight." As she punched at her wet phone screen with increasing frustration, I remained outwardly calm despite my racing heart. The die was cast. There was no going back now. All I could do was see this through to the end and hope my preparations would be enough. True to her word, Karen called the police. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers stood in my backyard, surveying the wreckage of the gala with professionally neutral expressions. Water continued to slosh gently across the broken remains of the dance floor, while a few lingering guests watched the drama unfold from a safe distance. "I want this man arrested immediately," Karen demanded, her voice still shaking with rage. "He deliberately sabotaged the event by activating the pool equipment. This is willful destruction of property, and he endangered dozens of people." The older officer turned to me. "Sir, can you explain what happened here?" Before I could answer, Karen interrupted. "He turned on the wave machine. It was an act of sabotage." "Ma'am, please let him speak," the officer said firmly. I maintained a calm demeanor despite my racing heart. "Officers, I believe there was a malfunction with the pool system due to the unusual stress placed upon it. Prior to this event, I expressed significant concerns about building a structure over an active pool." I walked to my dining room and returned with a folder I had prepared days earlier. "I have documentation you might find relevant." The folder contained everything. The original HOA letter demanding use of my property, my email to Karen expressing concerns about potential damage to the pool system, the contractor's diagram showing how support beams would rest against critical pool components, and most importantly, the assessment from a pool maintenance company warning specifically about potential system irregularities if weight was applied improperly. I specifically warned about the risk of equipment malfunction under these conditions, I explained, pointing to the highlighted sections of the maintenance report. Unfortunately, those concerns were dismissed. The officers reviewed the documents carefully while Karen fumed beside them, her once immaculate makeup now completely ruined. "This appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one," the senior officer finally concluded. "There is no evidence of deliberate sabotage, only a foreseeable equipment malfunction following construction that appears to have disregarded professional warnings." "That is ridiculous," Karen exploded. "Are you blind? He obviously did this on purpose." "Ma'am, without evidence, we cannot pursue criminal charges," the officer replied calmly. "I suggest you contact your insurance company and perhaps consult a civil attorney if you wish to pursue this further." As the police departed, Karen stood in my driveway, her wet dress now stained and bedraggled. "This is not over," she promised, her voice low and dangerous. "I will sue you for everything you have." "I look forward to discovery," I replied quietly. "I am sure the court would be interested in how HOA funds were used for an event designed to benefit your personal business ventures." Her eyes widened slightly. She had not expected me to know about the investors. Without another word, she stalked to her car and drove away, leaving me to survey the destruction of my once beautiful backyard. The following week, an emergency HOA meeting was called to address the incident. I arrived early with multiple copies of my documentation folder, plus new additions, photographs of the damaged pool equipment, and an itemized repair estimate totaling over $15,000. To my surprise, the community center was packed. Not a single seat remained empty. As the meeting began, I prepared for another orchestrated attack on my character. What happened instead left me speechless. One by one, neighbors rose to speak, not about the ruined gala, but about Karen's history of bullying and manipulation. Elaine described being fined $500 for planting unapproved flowers. The Rodriguez family detailed how Karen had threatened them with daily penalties over their son's basketball hoop. Robert, the lawyer, revealed how Karen had selectively enforced rules against homeowners who had opposed her in the past. The dam had broken. Years of intimidation and fear dissolved as neighbor after neighbor found the courage to finally speak out. Karen sat rigid in her chair, watching her carefully constructed kingdom crumble around her. The final blow came when the HOA treasurer, a quiet accountant named Michael, requested the floor. "I have completed an audit of our accounts," he announced solemnly. "There are concerning irregularities regarding the gala expenses." He distributed a report showing how Karen had allocated HOA funds for premium elements specifically requested by her potential investors, including high-end catering that exceeded the approved budget by thousands of dollars. By meeting's end, Karen was asked not only to resign, but to personally cover all damages to my property. Her resignation letter arrived the next day, along with a certified check covering the full repair estimate plus an additional amount for inconvenience. 2 months later, my backyard had been restored, not just to its original condition, but improved with an updated filtration system and energy-efficient heating. The wave machine, ironically, was the only component that had survived unscathed. More important than the physical restoration was the healing that took place within our community. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now stopped to chat. Impromptu gatherings happened organically without fear of citation. A new HOA board was elected, comprising a diverse group of residents committed to transparency and reasonable governance. On a warm Saturday afternoon, I hosted a genuine community pool party. As I watched my neighbors laughing and enjoying themselves, I spotted Robert approaching with a glass of lemonade. "You know what they are saying about you now?" he asked with a smile. "That you created a wave that washed away more than just a dance floor. It washed away the fear that had been drowning our community for years." I dipped my toes into the crystal-clear water, feeling the gentle current of the wave machine on its lowest setting. Sometimes, I realized, justice comes not as a thunderbolt but as a wave, building slowly but inexorably until it cannot be denied. In standing up to Karen, I had not just saved my own pool but had helped restore the true meaning of community to Oakwood Estates.